Hi, everybody. I am Sigfried Trent, game designer, co creator of Everyday Heroes, and the rather silly leader of Sig Trent Games. I'm going to give you an update on what's going on with Sig Trent Games here in week 8. We are going to offer you some game design advice, and finally, I'll talk a little bit about my life. I use the royal we there. All right, so this is week 8 of Sig Trent Games. Wow, so like that's 2 months. It feels like it's been a long time because I've done a whole bunch of stuff in the last 2 months, and it feels like a short time. As in, like, oh my God, there's so much more to do, and 2 weeks or 2 months have already passed. So yeah, there you go. I don't know. Time keeps marching on, but we're having a good time and doing lots of interesting things. So let's talk about what we did in this week. So Debatable Actions is now available. That's something I finished up last week, and this is a kind of a debate source book for Everyday Heroes, which helps people if you want to have a scene where you're like convincing the bad guy to give up, or you are trying to persuade a crowd to join with you to storm the castle, whatever it is you're doing in Everyday Heroes that involves a contentious verbal argument, then Debatable Actions is really kind of a cool tool to bring a lot of tension and excitement to these kinds of events with a sort of combat like situation. So it's a pretty cool system. It has rounds and turns just like a combat does. And there are arguments and there are rebuttals, which are kind of like reactions, and the arguments are kind of attacks. But there's a whole bunch of different special effects that they have, and then each argument also gives you some role playing cues and explains what kind of an argument it is. And so this really helps people who A, want a little bit of a framework and help with their role playing in these kinds of situations, and B, people who want some game elements in there to make this a little bit more exciting and a little bit more of a tactical experience. So I really had a great time role playing and testing it. It's a pretty fun system. I think you'll like it. It's only $5. So if you want to go over to Drive Through RPG, you can pick it up from Lewis Porter Jr. Designs. Cool company. We have a partnership, so I get proceeds directly from the sales of that game. So if you want to pick it up, I highly suggest it. It would really help us out. And I think you'll have a good time with it. Next up that we've been doing, Shotgun Fantasy. So I spent a fair bit of time earlier this week working on it. I got the outline of the book done, which is, that usually doesn't take terribly long, but it's an important step in the process because it really helps me define what's going to be in there, how much attention I'm going to focus on the different parts of it. So that's a pretty good step. I also did some writing, so there's going to be some conversion elements in there to help you convert between Dungeons and Dragons, like taking monsters and bringing them into Everyday Heroes, and also taking characters from Everyday Heroes and sort of sending them to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, or vice versa, taking fantasy characters and bringing them to the modern age, that kind of thing. So I was starting with a little bit of that sort of technical work on just, a nice, clear guide on how to do that, how it works, the parts you need to worry about, and the parts you don't need to worry about. Because some of the stuff you're just like, this is how it works. Because really, the two systems are very compatible and interchangeable in many ways. So you could just play the rules from one game in the other game pretty easily. But still, people want to know exactly how to do it. So we're going to go through all the details of that in that book, as well as present classes. So we're sort of the core D&D style classes as Everyday Hero classes, so you can play that way. And then that'll give you a lot of fantasy elements like magical systems and spells that you can bring into your Everyday Heroes games. So should be a pretty cool book, I think. A little less ambitious than what Evil Genius Games is doing with Everyday Arcana, but I think it'll be, since that book is still a ways out, I know people are really jonesing for it, so I wanted to give them something they can sort of sink their teeth into in the meantime. So that's the goal with Shotgun Fantasy. So I'm excited about it. I'm going to be working on it a bunch this week. That is my main focus. I don't have a lot of other not Evil Genius games, Sig Trent Games activities to work on during this week. What else have we got? Hero sheets. I was supposed to advertise them this last week, but then I got into the process of doing a Facebook ad. It's a really cool system, but there's a lot to learn about how the ads are targeted and how they're structured. And I came to realize that the way you do the targeting wouldn't really work for a product like Hero Sheets because it's within a very small audience. So, and only people that currently play Everyday Heroes are going to be interested. And I could just reach such people better using Facebook groups my own audience, the Discord for Evil Genius Games, my Discord, the places where people who play Everyday Heroes already hang out online. Now, there's probably a few more people I could reach in the wider role-playing community that aren't in those communities but do play Everyday Heroes. But the targeting is just really tough with Facebook. I have to kind of go after every tabletop RPG player, and it's a pretty big base, and only a certain number of them are going to be interested. So I don't think we'll get a lot of hits for the small spend that I want to do. So I'm going to need a more generalized product. Shotgun Fantasy would be good because people are going to be interested in that, even if they're not necessarily Everyday Heroes players, because it's got this, it transfers between two systems. So people who are D&D players who want to be interested in Everyday Heroes could be interested in that. So, yeah. So I think we'll save the Facebook paid ads for when we have a product. It's a little bit more of a general audience product than the character sheets are. So that's the plan. Hero sheets are still selling, though. Not at a massive pace, but we did sell more of them this week, bringing, I think, my total sales up to 27, 28, so we're moving up on 30, which means, I made more than $100 on them, so that's pretty nice. Pretty happy with that. So we will keep selling those, and part of the whole goal on that, and with every product we put out, is not just to sell initially, but to be something that over the long run returns money back to the company and lets us work on the next product. So, but if you know anybody out there, if you haven't picked them up yet, the hero sheets are really great so far. People have been really enjoying them, so I do suggest it. If you've been on the fence, they're worth a go. Let's see, what else? Anne has been taking business courses, not sort of official courses, but studying up the basics of running a business so that she can help with Sig Trent Games. That's going pretty well. She's doing outlines and questionnaires, and we're talking about what my vision for the company is, what my forecasts are, which I don't have any of those yet, but I do have a vision, and there's a lot of things about how I want the company to exist that she's starting to understand in the framework of these basic business courses and stuff. Plus, there's new questions for me that I don't have answers for, which means I need to kind of hit the books myself, figure out answers for those things. Some things are a little early because the business is very small at this point, so a lot of the things that a typical business that's going to be doing, major money kind of activity, a less grassroots endeavor, has to answer up front. But I don't really have to do that because I'm not going to banks with a business plan. I'm not looking for investors that need forecasts for revenue and things like that. So some of it's just, I'll deal with that when we get to that. But there are other things that are really important. Any business needs to plan. There are certain legal requirements that you have to do to register, tax considerations, accounting that you need to do, stuff like that. So all that's pretty important. So work progresses. I think in the coming week, I am mostly going to be focused on Shotgun Fantasy and advertising Debatable Actions and working on some videos. So that's the main plan. I'm going to do another video after this where I'm going to use the hero sheets in order to make a character. I've got it all scripted out, but I need to actually record the video. So that's it for Sig Trent Games in week 8. What is my game design tip of the week? Well, it is avoiding bad choices in TTRPGs. And what do I mean by bad choices? So these are options that you give a character, or a player, I should say, during character creation that are just not very good, especially when you're comparing them to other options. So if you get, to make a silly example, a feat that could give you +1 strength and a feat that could give you +2 strength, well, obviously, you're going to pick the +2 strength feat, since both feats kind of have the same cost in character building and progression. One of them does more than the other one, so why would you ever pick the weaker one? That's what we call a bad choice. Now, usually bad choices aren't laid out quite that easy to compare, but sometimes they are. I've reviewed documents and gone, look, I don't think I, as a player, am ever going to use this option. Yeah, it has a fun name, and it's kind of a cool idea, and it might be sort of fun for role-playing, but choosing character options, I want to get some bang for my buck. It's not that I want to min-max everything. Maybe I do, but it's just that I want my choices to feel good later in play. And if you just want to do role-playing stuff, you can always do that for free. If your character wants to be a shoe salesman, nothing is going to stop you. You don't need to pay anything for that. It doesn't have a cost because it doesn't give you a specific benefit in game. Now, of course, game masters can always award advantage. So if you're doing something very shoe related, yeah, maybe they're going to give you advantage for that role-playing choice. But you could have done that no matter what, right? Well, my character is a shoe hobbyist. It just so happens. And so in a situation where shoes are important, maybe some kind of tracking roll, maybe I can get an advantage. But it's not baked in. It's not guaranteed that the game master is going to give you that. So it's not something you would buy during character creation. So that's what a bad choice is about. And they come in a lot of varieties. Sometimes they're a little bit hard to spot. This doesn't mean, by the way, that every character option needs to be exactly as good as every other character option. It's just that you don't want one that is so obviously weaker, or that is so similar to something else but weaker, that it becomes kind of meaningless. The real problems with these, which are pretty obvious, are it feels like filler to the reader. So they're going to see something that they're never going to probably use. And it just looks like the game designer ran out of ideas, but they needed the book to be a certain length. So they just threw one of these in. There are some other kinds of filler, but that's definitely a kind of filler nobody really wants to see. So it gives you a little bit of a bad reputation and a feeling of less value when the customer's going through the book. Generally speaking, nobody's going to enjoy it. Now, my big reason for making games is not to make a lot of money, Lord knows. It is not for the fame and glory. There's other ways to get that. It is really just to help people have fun. I want people to enjoy the game. That's the number one thing is somebody says, I had so much fun with it. That gives me a great feeling. I like it when people read it and they go, it's really well written and very clever. That's nice too, but it's a much better feeling when people play it and they have a grand time, partly because of what I wrote. And so filler stuff, nobody's going to take it. Nobody's going to have fun with it. Now, maybe one random person will take it because they think it's kind of a cool name or something like that, or they thought maybe it would be good, but then when they start playing, it's not so good. And so then they're going to have like a bad time. They're going to have this bad experience and have a regret. Oh man, this is stuck on my character now. Now, personally, as a GM, I allow people to change things out if they end up just not liking them. But yeah, especially if they don't use it. But as a game designer, you don't want that experience because then that's going to be a negative experience associated with your game. It's not good. So those are the main reasons to avoid that sort of a thing. So how do you fix it is another question. Because, you're going to come up with an idea and you write it, and either your editor or somebody else or you is going to go, it's not very good. Or your play testers are going to go, I would never take that. So how do you deal with this? You can do a risk versus reward strategy. So sometimes you make it weak because you're worried that it's going to be too strong. So you can add an element of randomness to something that's a little bit strong. Or if something's a little bit weaker, you can make it super consistent, where a better mechanic has a more random element to it. So it's going to happen less often, but it's going to be stronger when it does happen. So this is a way you can kind of balance and tweak things. Because sometimes you'll get in a situation you're like, well, it's weak like this, but if I do it the other way, it's incredibly strong, and it's too strong or too weak. So sometimes you can add another mechanical element, some chance of failure or a chance of success, that's going to put it somewhere in the middle. The next thing is strength versus consistency. So you can narrow when something is useful. So you can give somebody a really strong bonus in a relatively unusual circumstance. So a good example in Everyday Heroes is like driving skill mechanics. So there are some driving skill mechanics that will give you essentially advantage on almost every roll of a certain type that you're going to make in a driving encounter. But driving encounters are not a mainstay inside of Everyday Heroes unless you're playing like the Fast and the Furious scenario or something, or Mad Max on the road kind of a thing. So you can give a stronger mechanic in those narrow circumstances, and then it might occasionally be super awesome, but you know what? Like, the player's going to have a great time, but then in the next adventure, it's not going to happen so often, but they're still really satisfied that they had that one opportunity to really dominate the situation because they made that choice. And that's the thing about bad choices. You always want choices to be rewarded. You want players to go, I made that choice and it worked out great and I feel happy, right? You don't want them to go, I made that choice and now I totally regret it. So that's what you're trying to avoid. Investment payoff is another way you can do it. So if you have something that's a little weak, but it's a prerequisite or a requirement to get access to something that's a little bit stronger later on, or a lot stronger later on, then that can work. You still have to watch out balance-wise, because you don't want that final reward to be so good that it's just broken, and then your kind of weaker mechanic just becomes not a balancing mechanic, but just a way to get to the utterly broken thing. So you don't want that. But you can sort of balance off two things that are going to go together. You get something a little weak at lower level, but it leads to something a little bit stronger at higher level. It's a pretty good role-playing mechanic, so that works. I like to avoid prerequisites most of the time in my design for Everyday Heroes, but there are some occasions where I use them, and often like that in order to gate a stronger mechanic. You'll see that sometimes in my multi-class feats. The lower level multi-class feat, depending on the class, might not have a lot of super strong things, probably because the thing that the class got at low level was really strong, and I can't put it in a feat. But then I'll load up the advanced one with some pretty strong stuff, so that between the two feats you take, it ends up balancing out the cost, but also doesn't take away the thunder from the class. It's a part of the whole design for those guys. So that's another thing you can do. And finally, the thing you can do, if it's a really weak mechanic, but you love the role-playing element, you can essentially make it basically free. Come up with, call it a free feat or something. They're just little extra things that characters can take. The mechanics are so minor or so rarely going to pay off that it really doesn't make any difference in overall game balance. And just make those available. One piece of advice I often give to game masters is you can just give away player mechanics to the players. You can give them feats, you can give them little talents and things like that, so long as everybody on the team is going to get access to these things. And you know to balance your encounters a little bit. If these things that you give them are strong, just like magic items, it's perfectly fine for the game. You just have to be aware you're doing it. So little kind of weaker mechanics, just make them easily accessible in your game system, and then they're fine. They're just kind of gimmies and freebies, and nobody's going to worry about that too much. All right. I do want to add, so this is really with the focus of a tabletop role-playing game, where the choices a character makes are really about trying to have a good time and experience a cool, aha, my character is awesome moment a little bit later on. And they don't necessarily apply to other kinds of games. So let's talk a little bit about some of the games where, bad choices actually make sense. So collectible card games or other types of collectible games, collectible miniatures games, where there's a rarity of common, uncommon, rare, etc. You generally are going to expect that higher rarity items that you can collect are a little bit more powerful than lower rating items. It doesn't always work that way, but you can definitely do that, and it sort of encourages players to buy more stuff because they want to get the rare ones a little more than they want to get the common ones. I don't know if that's a dirty psychological trick or not. It almost just falls in line with expectations that people have, and it makes it more exciting to get the rare and uncommon and super rares or whatever. So I think it's actually a good mechanic in those kind of games, because going into them, players do have an understanding that's part of the paradigm. It's just part of the expectations, so they don't feel cheated. So that's one example. Although, people hate terrible common cards. You've got a stack of them this high. You're never going to play one of them. I don't really like that so much, but still, it's part of that genre. Noob traps. So noob traps are something that you sometimes put in strategy games, which are things that look pretty good. And it's part of the learning process that players are going to try them out, realize that in the long run, they might not be the best strategy to take. Like, they have short-term gains, but then long-term sacrifices. Or they're just kind of bad choices, but they might be fun or interesting in some other way, or just strategically different. So as you play the game many times, you'll learn what the noob traps are, and you'll avoid them as an experienced player, but you still kind of got some enjoyment and some experience and some gameplay out of them when you were a noob. So they still help enrich the game, and they reward the growing experience of the player. That's less of a thing for an RPG, because it's about the experience of the story in as much as the tactics of the game. But in a pure strategy game, they do make some sense. hooks for future strategies. So sometimes when you're doing a strategy game again, you might want something that is a little bit weak to begin with. It's like an underdeveloped strategy, but you have an idea that you're going to do an expansion, and then like that faction of elves or whatever is that's a little weak in the first iteration of the game is going to get beefed up, and it gives people a reason to buy the elf pack expansion. But you because you knew you were going to do the elf pack expansion, you didn't really make the elves kind of their full potential just yet. That kind of thing can work, because then it keeps, when the elves come out, they don't dominate everybody else, right? Because now they're just more balanced, or maybe they got a little bit of an edge, and then your next expansion is going to bring another team up to have just a little bit of an edge, and so on and so forth. So long as it doesn't completely disrupt competitive play, you can do that kind of thing to drive further sales. It's okay. Like I said, you got to be real careful with that kind of stuff, though, because you don't want it to feel like, oh, I should only play elves, or I should never play elves, that kind of thing. But every strategy game with factions that are not exactly the same is going to have different disparities that are going to naturally be discovered by players. Often the game designers don't always know exactly how much stronger each thing is, because you can play test as a game designer, but you can't play test the way people actually playing the game are going to play test with thousands of people doing it. Roguelikes is another kind of a game where there's a lot of luck involved, and so it's part of like, did I roll really well this run, and did I get the really cool rare stuff, or did I get kind of the common junk stuff, and this is going to be a struggle run, but then I'll build up for the next one. So the whole roguelike strategic paradigm is a pretty interesting twist on strategy games, but games like that need bad options to make the good options more exciting. It's pretty similar, I guess, to the collectible games, but there's a different element, because in a roguelike you're not paying for more options. You're just spending time in order to get a greater chance of random stuff that will help that particular run be an especially good one. All right, well, those are most of the situations. If you can think of more cool situations where bad choices are good in other games, or even if you think bad choices make sense in RPG design, put it in the comments below. I've definitely had other very skilled game designers disagree with my take on this, but it's one that certainly in my design, I'm always looking to make every choice a fun choice and a good choice. So let's move on to what I've been doing in gaming. I didn't play a whole lot this week, but I did play some Pal World, and I did finally get my perfect mount. Most of my past reports, I'm breeding pals. I'm trying to get the perfect flying mount. I don't know that there's a perfect flying mount. It depends on what you want. But I got one with all the speed traits and all the stamina traits that are the highest level for that kind of pal can have. I made a Shadow Beak, which is one of the better flying pals that you can breed, but it's very hard to breed because there's only certain formulas that you get into it. I think I went through hundreds of offspring in order to get it until I finally got one. I was like, yes. And it's very good. It's quite fast. It can fly a really long way. It's not as fast as the fastest flying mount in the game, but that one has very poor stamina, so it can't go very far before you have to land again. So this is a great one to like fly across oceans, fly over continents, and it's a pretty good fighter too. So happy with that. It's maybe not 100% perfect because its combat stats could use a little bit more work, but that's easily enough handled. Make some potions, and I can get those up. I've been playing Vampire Survivor. This is a mobile game, usually. I think you can play it on PC too. I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of a roguelike, and you just play a character, and all you do with that character is you move. You move around on a map, and waves of monsters attack you, shoot at you, try to jump on you, make obstacles for you. And then as your character defeats them, they gain experience. And when they level up, they get like a new weapon. So it might be a little aura around your character that damages people. You might shoot out daggers. You might shoot out lasers. You might blast everything on the screen. There's all kinds of different things. And as you get more and more XP, you level up these different skills. And you can only level up a certain number of them. And the ones you're offered are random. It's kind of a roguelike style game. And then as you complete stages, you unlock new stages, you unlock different characters with different abilities as they level up, etc., etc. It's a role-playing arcade game, I guess you might say. So it has elements of like straight-up arcade game, but also definitely kind of some role-playing elements, but not in the like my character has a personality and a backstory. No, you just fight waves of endless monsters, but it has the RPG and the level progressions and different skills that you can level up. So it's pretty good. I like it. It's a good bedtime game. You just kind of go until the monsters kill you, or I think at 30 minutes, death shows up and he just annihilates you, almost no matter what you do. So I've been playing it to kind of chill out and go to bed. It's good for that. It puts me in a little mesmerized state, and then I zonk out. So a little trouble sleeping this week because we had a power outage. I took a long nap, and that just like sort of threw off my sleep schedule a bit. So I've been playing a fair bit of Vampire Survivor. The other game I played this week was Phasmophobia. I don't know if you know that game, but it is a cool ghost hunting game, like those ghost hunting TV shows. You wander around in a house and you look for clues for ghosts and try to get the picture of the ghost and collect evidence of the ghost. And a big part of the game mechanic is trying to guess what ghost it is. And there's a little kind of grid and a system where if you collect a certain amount of evidence, you'll know what ghost it is. But often you don't get all the clues you need. And so you need to know like secondary traits on the ghost and stuff. It's a quiet, kind of peaceful game, unless you're really scared of ghosts, which I'm generally not. But I enjoy it. Anne loves it. So I agree to play with it, play with her in the game from time to time, help her out on her ghost hunts. I like it. It's a fun game, but I can only play it for about maybe an hour or two before I'm like, that's enough Phasmophobia for now. But it's a really well-crafted game, and the game designers are always adding new stuff to it. There's a new house that looks really cool and has all kinds of neat stuff to play around with. They've started adding like puzzles and secret things inside of the maps to look for, so I think that's really cool. And there's more and more stuff you can like pick up, interact, and throw pool cues around, and I don't know, just generally mess around in the game. So I think it's a really cool, well-made game. So I do recommend it. And that's about it for games this week. Life in general. Also going to keep this pretty short. There's not a lot to say. Work has fallen into a cadence. This is my 4th week working at the Breezy Ocean Gift Shop, and got down most of the thing. I did do some new things this week, but nothing terribly exciting. My health is now, I get through the day without much trouble. My feet are a little sore if I'm on my feet for 8 hours, but that's to be expected. Yeah, that's about it. So it's going well. I enjoy my coworkers. I really enjoy the customers. The work is not the most exciting. It's not the worst either. We got Pokemon cards in today, and they sold out in like, actually we got them in yesterday. They sold out in the first hour we were there. And so the rest of the weekend, everybody's coming in looking for Pokemon. Got no Pokemon. Sorry. See that empty spot in the case? That's where it used to be. And we can't order anymore. So it goes. Next time we should order a lot of Pokemon if we can, I think. It's pretty popular in the area. I don't play Pokemon CCG, and talking to a lot of these collectors, they're not really people who play the game either. They just collect the cards. So more power to them. We also got Lorcana at the store. If you're ever in Ocean Shores and you want to come by, Breezy Ocean Gifts. We got some cool games, board games, other stuff like that in there. So some good geek stuff. No Everyday Heroes. They don't really carry role-playing games, but lots of other fun things. Yeah, I don't know. Like this week, I was a little tired because we had the power outage, and I think it threw off my sleep schedule. So just a little low energy, but not unhappy. Just kind of a content, cruising kind of a week. So hopefully this week, maybe it'll be a little more exciting. Maybe I'll have a little more zip in my step. I don't know, or maybe not. But that's fine because I am content with okay most of the time. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Have fun out there. Good gaming to everybody, and we'll see you next time. Good night.